Games Workshop has given us a little bit of a preview for 40k in the holiday season by previewing some of the battle forces that will be available in Q4 2020. So let's take a break from datasheet deep dives and do, I guess, a battle force breakdown and talk about the units and the viability of each of these battle force boxes and whether or not they're worth you picking them up. What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're talking about some battle forces. So these 6 boxed sets were previewed on Warhammer Community just recently and offer a starting point for players to get into 6 separate factions at a pretty good place. Now, what hasn't been previewed yet is the cost for each of these battle forces. So I'm going to be going through each one and talking about the relative merits of each of the units inside. That said, I don't know how much each of these boxes costs. So if the box has much greater than the value of the units in it combined, it could still be worth picking up even if not everything in it is particularly competitive. That's just something that we're going to have to see later on down the line. So let's talk about them one at a time and talk about the competitiveness and the viability of each of the units inside the box and whether, as a whole, it will be worth you picking up. Now, one thing I want to mention that I do like that Games Workshop has pointed out here is that a lot of the units in these boxes are in multi-unit kits, which means they can be assembled into one of 2 or 3 different variations to create alternate units that you can put into your army. And they have clarified that these kits do build both halves of whatever kit you're in. So you do have some optionality in what actually comes in the box. In the past, some of the battle forces that they've sent out have not included the extra options, and you'd only be able to build one variety of unit, but in these, they've let us know that we can build whatever we want, which is awesome. First up, we have the Space Marine box, which includes a Captain in Phobos armor, 10 Infiltrator or Incursors, 10 Reavers, an Invictor Tactical Warsuit, and an Impulsor. This is basically just out of the Shadow Seer starter set that they had last year, especially with all these Infiltrators and this Phobos Captain and this real Phobos bent to it. Now, unfortunately, generally speaking, a lot of the Phobos stuff is not particularly playable. Impulsors are just fine. They're a little easier to kill than they were in 8th edition, but they're great at getting your impactful units and characters to the front line of the field, which is where you want them to be. You can put 2 units of Blade Guard veterans in one, run it right up the table into your opponent's face. They'll kill it. They'll pop out onto an objective. It's really obnoxious to get rid of them. Impulsors are great. Invictor Tactical Warsuits, not so awesome. Unfortunately, they lost access to a lot of the rerolls and buffs because they do not have the core keyword. So generally, you'll want to be taking something that's a little more synergistic to your army than an Invictor. Typically, those get left at home. Incursors and Infiltrators are awesome. They are a great unit to have in your stable because they can forward deploy up in front of your army. They can deny the enemy board space. They can take objectives and start putting banners on objectives early. It's amazing. Those are excellent units to have. So between those and the Impulsor, those are the real mainstays of this Battle Force box. Unfortunately, Reavers are terrible. They are just the opposite. Now, one thing you could do to get value out of this box, if you did pick it up, is you can assemble the Reavers with a carbine variant rather than their knife and bolt pistol. And if you replace their helmets with an Infiltrator or Incursor-esque helmet, you could probably get by running them as that other unit, but generally, you're almost always going to want to avoid Reavers in almost every situation. Potentially, there's an argument to be made for the Sons of Mordecai in Space Wolves. They're probably just a fine unit, but Reavers, the vanilla Reavers out of a vanilla Space Marine chapter, no good. Get those guys out of there. Kind of the same with the Phobos Captain. There are some builds that use a Phobos Captain, but they are very few and far between. And unfortunately, generally, if you're bringing a Space Marine Captain, you want a real punchy Captain, like a Storm Shield Captain or a Mini Marine Captain with a Thunderhammer or something like that. Mini Marine meaning a Firstborn Marine who's not a Primaris. I should clarify that. So unfortunately, about half of this box is not particularly optimized, and there are ways to build around it, but unless it comes with a significant discount over purchasing the units independently, I don't think I would pick this up. You can pick up something a little bit more value than an Invictor Warsuit. Redemptor Dreadnoughts are very good right now. If you want a big stoppy robot kind of guy, standard Intercessors or Assault Intercessors are usually going to be a little bit more useful than Reavers, and there are a whole swath of Captain profiles that are better than this Phobos Captain. Moving on to the Necron Battle Force, this one includes 10 Warriors, 5 Immortals or Death Marks, 5 Triarch Praetorians or Lich Guard, a Canoptic Spider, a Triarch Stalker, a Doom Scythe or Night Scythe, as well as a Technomancer. Now, I'll preface this section by saying that the new Necron Codex is very much undiscovered territory as far as I'm aware in the metagame right now, so the viability of every unit hasn't totally been discerned. But that said, I know that all of the infantry in this box are very widely played. Necron warriors are great. You need a bunch of them to play most Necron lists. I don't think many Necron lists leave home without at least 40 of these guys. Immortals are just fine. There are a lot of builds that use units of 5 or 10 Immortals to do a little bit more damage while maintaining that OBSEC. And Lich Guard, not the Praetorian ones. Get rid of the Praetorians. Get those guys out of there. Lich Guard are great at just being a resilient mainstay melee unit to sort of hold the center of the board and hold your opponent off objectives. In addition, the Technomancer Cryptek is phenomenal. That guy is one of the core pieces of a Necron army. He makes your vehicles work. He helps repair your guys. He's excellent. You're going to want them as well. The vehicles are where things get a little bit shaky. I think the Triarch Stalker is relatively playable, but there's a lot more better options in the Codex. The Doom Scythe, Night Scythe also don't see much play anymore. However, the Canoptek Spider does. There are some builds that use Canoptek Spiders to revive and repair Scarab Swarms, to put a bunch of Scarab Swarms on the table. There are also 3 Scarab Swarms. They're not noted in the article, but they usually come on sprues with other units. So there's a unit of 3 Scarab Swarms included in there as well. Generally, I think the units in this box are probably going to be relatively playable. Outside of, I think, the Doom Scythe and Night Scythe, basically everything at least has a place in the Necron faction, and especially having the infantry and that character available to you are excellent. Again, this box will sort of have to supersede the value of those vehicles, I think, in order to be a good deal, but generally speaking, the core of the box is going to be relatively solid. Next up, we have Astra Militarum. This is going to be a bit of an interesting one. This box includes 20 guardsmen, a command squad, a heavy weapon squad, 1 scout sentinel, a chimera, and a hydra/wyvern. Now, the infantry in this box is great. You want as many guardsmen as possible if you're going to be playing Astra Militarum. Probably at least 30 plus is like where I would start with a guard army. And this unit already comes with 20 of them plus a command squad, so you're coming out of the gate swinging. Also, the more platoon commanders you have and officer units, the better. You want a bunch of those guys as well to give orders to your infantry. Having that command squad, you can usually build those into special weapon teams or special weapon squads that have a bunch of special weapons, and those are typically playable. Generally, you want those in Tempestus Scions so that they can come out of Deep Strike. Some people convert their standard guardsmen into Tempestus Scions to fulfill that role. You could just, I think, play the normal one, put them in transports, and it's probably fine as well. Chimeras are just fine. Dedicated transports are really good right now. You want them to get onto an objective and pile out objective secured infantry once they die, so having a chimera is great. Where this falls down are the heavy weapons teams, in my opinion, as well as the Hydra/Wyvern. Unfortunately, the Hydra-Wyvern chassis is not a very good one. There's not a lot that you need a Hydra for. A Wyvern right now is just shooting at infantry with its mortars, and unfortunately that's not really something that guard players typically need to worry a great deal about. So that tank in particular, you're probably not going to get much use out of. The Sentinel is fine because it's low points, but they don't see a ton of play. They usually just give up 2 big game hunter points pretty easily, and likewise, the heavy weapons teams aren't super duper useful either. So generally, I think I'd give this box an okay in terms of value. All of the infantry is going to be useful. The Chimera is going to be useful. The other stuff, less so. I think specifically the heavy weapons teams and the tank, you probably aren't going to use that stuff. You would much rather have a Leman Russ or a Manticore or another big piece of artillery like that. But other than that, I think the box generally will have pretty good value. So again, if the total value for money of the box is going to be enough to discount you past, wanting to buy that relatively useless tank, then you're going to be okay. Next up, we have Chaos Space Marines. This box comes stock with 10 Chaos Space Marines, 5 Havocs, 5 Terminators, a Mauler Fiend/Forge Fiend, and a Chaos Lord with a Thunderhammer. Now, this is where I get a little bit negative. Chaos Space Marines tend to rely very heavily on their cult troops, so that's things like Noise Marines, Thousand Suns, Plague Marines, stuff like that. And rather than seeing sort of generic Chaos Space Marine warbands, a lot of times the basic troops allotment for your Chaos Space Marine detachments is going to be filled up by cultists because they're very cheap. Occasionally, maybe you'll take 5 Chaos Space Marines if you have a couple extra points and you want a more resilient body to put on the table. But generally, you don't really use a ton of those guys. Chaos Terminators are nice to have, and there's some builds that use Chaos Terminators, but they're kind of hit or miss. And with a lot of Chaos Space Marine armies, you really need to know the direction you want to go in before you start, building up the core of your army, because they tend to be very specialized. So you kind of want to know what legion you're going into, and then build into the cult troops out of that particular sub-faction. Havocs, on the other hand, are very useful. Either the Reaper chain cannon build or just like 4 las cannons are very good. You can put you can put Mark of Slanesh on them, so they can shoot twice with Endless Cacophony. You know, Veterans of the Long War to get +1 to wound on all that shots. You can buff them up with psychic powers. They're excellent. That's super good. Unfortunately, a Chaos Lord on foot with a Thunderhammer, not super good. Usually, the Chaos Lord builds that are particularly viable are kind of highly specialized, and you typically want a jump pack guy, I think, if you're not going a different direction. Generally, Chaos HQ choices are filled with other stuff, like Sorcerers, especially because their Psychic trees tend to be pretty good, so you don't typically see a lot of Chaos Lords. And also, the Mauler Fiend / Forge Fiend is like sort of hilariously suboptimal, so I mean, it's a fine vehicle, but you would rather take other stuff, I think, generally. So personally, I do not think I would go for this Chaos Space Marine box. I think I would look elsewhere to start a Chaos Space Marine army. Next up is the Tau Empire, bringing in 10 Fire Warriors, 10 Pathfinders, 3 Crisis Suits, 1 Broadside Battle Suit, a Piranha, a Commander, and drones. Now, I think very much like Necrons, but probably for a different reason. The Tau metagame is sort of up in the air right now. A lot of people don't really know the best direction to go in for Tau, and I'm not sure that this battle force is it. The ground battle suits, or sort of the small battle suits, are not typically very good. If they get touched in melee, they get shut down basically permanently. The Piranha as well. Not doing too much with that guy. He's just going to be giving up big game hunter points, I think, a lot of times and getting blown up by eradicators and stuff. That said, the infantry and the drones are usually very good. A lot of times you'll want a couple Fire Warrior teams in your army to fill out your troops. Having a bunch of drones is always nice because any Tau Empire army you build is going to have a billion drones. But bringing the standard battle suits in, they typically tend to be highly specialized if you have a list that brings them in. And, you have to sort of be ready for them to get shut down almost immediately if somebody touches them. I think a lot of Tau Empire armies are going to want the bigger, stompier battle suits because they have that all-important monster keyword, which gives them access to big guns never tire. So if you are going to build sort of a Tau Empire fire base, you're going to want those guys. Not to say that the little battle suits are entirely useless. You'll definitely want the commander battle suit, and in some factions like Farside Enclaves, you can sometimes build small battle suit units that are relatively effective, but that's pretty specialized. I don't think broadside battle suits are very competitive at all. You almost never see them. So on the whole, I think I would give this battle force a miss. Unfortunately, just having a whole bunch of kind of mediocre units in there doesn't really do much for you, and especially that Broadside and the Piranha aren't really helping out at all either. Now, last up, my favorite faction, the Tyranids, get a battle force. And this one's kind of a doozy. Unlike the other ones, where a lot of the other battle forces, we've talked about the infantry being very valuable, but the big stuff being kind of hit or miss. I think the Tyranids are probably a little bit different. So here's what we have in this box. We have 16 Genestealers, 10 Gargoyles, 3 Hive Guard or Tyrant Guard, an Exocrine or Haruspex, and a Hive Tyrant or the Swarm Lord. The first thing in the list there, 16 Genestealers, probably throw those guys out. It is a very dangerous unit. They can deal a bunch of damage in melee, but only against a very slim selection of targets, and they're very expensive and relatively easy to kill. So, especially just starting out in the game, I don't think I would start with 16 Genestealers. That said, everything else in this box is pretty much money. The Exocrine and Haruspex, not only being a very difficult kit to find, so if you can get one in this Battle Force box, awesome. A lot of times you have to like eBay, somebody's collection to get one of these things. So that's great. I just did a video on the Haruspex talking about it. I would not build this as a Haruspex. If I had the option, I would build an Exocrine because Exocrines are probably one of the best units in the entire codex. Same goes for Hive Guard. Usually you want units of 6, so if you are building out a Tyranid army, just pack in another box of 3 Hive Guard in there. Those guys are great as well. And lastly, the Hive Tyrant or the Swarm Lord. Phenomenal pick. The Swarm Lord is kind of the core of many Tyranid armies, so you're probably going to want him regardless of the archetype you're playing because his Hive Commander ability is so incredibly powerful, and in addition, having Hive Tyrants is good. Hive Tyrants are I mean, they're fine. They're not amazing, but they are just a fine unit. Gargoyles as well, a little bit of an odd one. They're not very widely used, but on the flip side, they are very useful. So I don't know if I would go out of my way to purchase Gargoyles, but I like to have them when they are in my army because they are very fast, they can perform actions, they can run into objectives. So really the only big stinker in this box is the Genestealers. You can still use them, and especially with the Swarm Lord, they have a little bit of use, especially at small point games. They can run in and blow some stuff up and then probably hold you in objective active for a turn and then probably die. But generally, as you expand out the army, I don't think I would use Gene Stealers. I would much rather have this box replace those with like Termagants or something. If you could fit, 20 or 30 Termagants in this box, it'd be perfect, but it's doing okay as it is. So I think I would give a big old thumbs up to the Tyranid box. I think it's just fine. And especially seeing as the Exocrine box is so sought after right now, having access to it in basically a starter set is like, yes, we're doing it. Okay, so those are my thoughts on these Battleforce boxes that were just previewed by Games Workshop. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving a like and a subscribe and all that YouTube stuff. Also, here's all my patrons. They're pretty cool. You can join them over at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise. You get all sorts of cool benefits. You get early access to videos. You can vote on Datasheet deep dive videos that we do. You also get early access to T5S2 and CPCS tournament pods that I run over in the Discord server, a link for which is in the description box down below. And last but not least, we also have a YouTube membership that you can join at the link below the video that gives you access to some cool channel badges and emojis that you can use yourself on the channel. So awesome stuff. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope again that you enjoyed the video. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.